Chinese population has declined for the first time in decades. It is a big deal because it marks the end of this era of rapid growth and of cheap labor.
China's ghost cities, or residential buildings without tenants or construction that never finished, have become visual metaphors for the ongoing crisis. China's real estate industry is collapsing in slow motion. These ghost cities, or residential buildings without tenants or construction that never finished, have become visual metaphors for the ongoing crisis.
That kind of really undermined the confidence among home buyers because they were now worried that developers might not deliver the apartment that they had put a down payment on.
More trouble in the South China Sea.
Moving on to another story that we are watching this morning. China's economic growth coming in worse than expected.
It is shocking to know that the Chinese economy is in a state of turmoil. The Chinese economy, which is known for its supremacy and as a competitor for the world most developed economies like the United States of America and the European Union nations, is facing a downtrend currently. And I was also shocked, and I just wanted to delve deeper into the matter to gauge what exactly is causing this concern for the Chinese people. I read multiple articles, I watched different videos, and I finally concluded that there were three main reasons which caused the economic downtrend that China is facing. In this video, I will present these three main reasons, and I would like your opinions also as what do you think were the main reasons? Are these three reasons which I present are the ones that you were also thinking, or there are some other additional reasons? So let's start. Okay, so let's just start with these three main issues which contributed to the current state of Chinese governance and economy. As you might understand, when the businesses and investors and citizens of a country are not confident on the governmental policies and the overall government that is there, then they resort to more savings and less investing. They want to secure their future and hence they save cash and invest less. This is the current state in China. Businesses, investors, and citizens are not trusting the government, so that the investing is so low that the economy has gone into a state of deflation. Because see, when the investing is low, the economic activity is low. Hence, the demand of goods and services is low. Hence, the prices for goods and services fall, and the economy gets into a state of deflation. But the real question here is what exactly led to the massive crisis of confidence among the businesses, citizens, and investors in China on the Chinese government? To answer this question, we should go a little past in the history. The Chinese government has been following the dictatorship since its inception into the modern history in 1949. This dictatorship grew even stronger with the advent of Xi Jinping in 2013. The policy is such that there's less of transparency on the data. The people believe that the government massages the data and presents the optimistic views. Furthermore, recently, the government made crackdowns on major private companies by interfering in their corporate affairs and increasing regulatory burdens. This has decimated entrepreneurial confidence, and very few Chinese now aspire of becoming an entrepreneur in China. Some of the popular and noticeable crackdowns in the technology sector have been on Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, and the regulations imposed on the gaming industry in China. For Jack Ma, it was in 2020 when the Chinese government altered the much anticipated IPO of Jack Ma and Group. This marked the start of broader regulatory actions targeting major tech companies like Alibaba, Tencent. The Chinese government was basically scared of the data that Alibaba held and the monopoly that Alibaba would have created. The government even imposed fines on Jack Ma for alleged antitrust violations. Most of it, I think, was to prevent Jack Ma from becoming a powerful entrepreneur in China. The Chinese government, I think, was not ready to accept someone having a monopoly of power in terms of the data that it holds, in terms of the money that it has made in China, and hence all these regulations, these fines came into picture. The government was also restrictive in the gaming industry. Children were also forced to adhere to a 3-hour watch time in a week, and the gaming content was regulated. It should be as per the approval of the Chinese government. The financial sector was even worse. There were death punishments given to banking officials by the government. According to the state media, the vice governor of the People's Bank of China was sentenced to death, and even former Bank of China boss was arrested on bribery charges. In fact, there was a massive salary cut for people working in the financial sector. It was said that it was to promote equal salary distribution among all the workers in China. But of course, when you cut the salaries to almost halves, then this is bad for the reputation of the government. Okay, so all these things, from opaque governance, heavy regulations, and interference of the government in the working of the businesses, have made the people, businesses, and investors in China less confident on the Chinese government. Another important event to notice here is of COVID-19. In fact, it was in COVID-19 only, or I would say post COVID-19 only, that we started seeing the dent in the Chinese economy. China, under the leadership of Xi Jinping, was pretty harsh in handling the COVID-19 by implementing the draconian zero COVID policy. This draconian zero COVID policy made complete lockdowns to all malls, streets, vendors, and everything. That it was even difficult for people to get access to the basic amenities like food and medicines. The zero COVID policy, or the complete lockdown, prevented the Chinese people from developing a herd immunity against the COVID-19 as compared to other nations like India, USA. They had also implemented the lockdowns, but at a moderate level that helped them cater to the demands of their citizens and also help their citizens to develop the herd immunity much faster. Furthermore, China did not approve of foreign vaccines, which were much needed to replace the domestic inefficient medicines. To understand this second issue, let me take you to the Chinese reform era, which spanned from 1978 till 1992. The economic model which was born during this era overemphasized on production, but it ignored demand. So when you produce more and you ignore the real demand, then you have inventories of products lying unused, and also to produce those goods you might have taken debts that needs to be paid. The economy grows well when the production and demand goes hand in hand. The economy gets into a state of deflation where there are more products and less of demand, and hence the price of these goods and products falls. This is the case that has happened in China. In the recent years, massive overproduction has exceeded the domestic as well as the international. This led to overcapacity, over inventory, debt-ridden manufacturing companies, and deflation. Let me give you some examples. First, let's see the steel production. In the early years of 21st century, like 2001 or 2, the Chinese steel with the country's surplus capacity eventually exceeded the entire steel output of Germany, Japan, and the United States combined.
You can check the graph where the Chinese steel production, which is depicted in the blue line, has been way ahead of the steel production by other countries, including United States of America, which is depicted by the gray line, Germany, which is depicted by the red line, and Japan, which is depicted by the dark gray line. And more recently, China has ended up with similar excesses in coal, aluminium, glass, cement, robotic equipment, electric vehicle batteries, and other materials. Solar panels are no exception. In fact, the production of solar panels increased to such an extent that the total solar panels produced every year by China are almost double the requirements worldwide. But this is the graph for production of electric vehicles from 2020 to 2024, and China's EV production not only met the demand of the domestic market but also exceeded global market needs, leaving the country with the excess supply. You can see these red boxes in the graphs, in the bar graphs, that represents the excess output. Robotics is another sector where China tried to overproduce and compete in the global market. This strategy of overproduction, which is not linked to the real demand, both domestic as well as internationally, I mean in the exports, is actually driven by the government's age-old vision of investing heavily on manufacturing to drive economic growth. But more than economic growth, this is to showcase that the government is investing on manufacturing infrastructure and the likes to represent a false idea that the economy is growing. However, this is more of just investing into infrastructure and manufacturing, which is not linked to the real demand of the people in China and the people globally. So the balance is missing. If you see their 5-year plans also, they are heavily focused on investment in manufacturing, technology, international trade, but very little focus is given on household consumption and the real demand side of things. So this unbalanced approach of overproduction, which is not linked to the real demand, has given rise to a number of issues. First is the debt-laden businesses and the local governments. The Chinese government pressurizes the local governments and businesses to increase production. Please understand that in China, the local governments are in charge of the funds. So these local governments and the businesses are pressurized by the government to produce more and more, as the government thinks production is the only way to reach economic growth. I have mostly read that the economic advisors, the real economic advisors, have very little say in developing, in framing the economic policies, and the government has more say into these matters with no consideration of the real demand in the picture. They take loans and debts to implement these projects. Real estate developers, for example, borrowed heavily in China to fund projects which were never completed or sold. All in all, these policies of overproduction and pressurizing the local governments and the businesses to produce more and take loans more and more, and also the funds are centralized, guys. The majority of the tax revenues is with the central government. So all these things sum up to one thing, that we have a debt-ridden local government and businesses in China. According to the Wall Street Journal publication of July 2024, the total amount of the book debts held by local governments across China now stands at between $7 trillion to $11 trillion. Now let us discuss the second issue that arises from this approach of overproduction. This issue is of deflation. To give you a context, deflation is the opposite of inflation. Inflation is when the prices of goods and services increase, and deflation is when the prices of goods and services decrease. So you might feel that this is good for the economy, you will have to pay less for the goods and services, but it is not like that. Deflation is not good for the economic growth. This is because the businesses cannot attain profits or maintain profits by selling the goods and services at a lower cost, and hence if the businesses are not doing well, then it will impact employment, and it will further impact the money that is circulating in the economy, and hence overall deflation is also not good for the economic growth. So in China specifically, talking about overproduction, where the production has exceeded the demand, the prices have fallen, and the economy has gone into a state of deflation. Companies in China actually compete on prices rather than the quality. So the Chinese economy focuses on quantity so that the businesses can compete on prices. So the technological competence and the quality of the products of China is always at question. Another issue that has arisen due to this unbalanced approach of overproduction is the growing tensions with the trade partners of China, like the United States of America and European Union nations. See, Chinese products have overcrowded the global market, which are available to people on cheap prices as compared to competitor manufacturers in the country. These cheap manufacturing products are a threat to the domestic manufacturers in the United States of America or EU countries or anywhere, I mean in India. Hence, the United States of America and other EU nations have responded to it by increasing the tariffs on Chinese products in a significant manner. For example, if you consider United States of America, this table depicts the old tariffs and the new tariffs. See, for example, steel and aluminum, the old tariff was 0 to 7.5%, and the new tariff is 25%. So this is a remarkable jump. Likewise for semiconductors, which was 25%, and now this is 50%. EVs from 25% to 100%. Lithium-ion EV batteries from 7.5% to 25%. Battery parts from 7.5% to 25%. Solar cells and medical products have seen a considerable growth in the tariffs. Similar to the USA, the EU, European Union, which is the political and economic group of 27 major countries in the Europe, has also placed provisional duties of up to 38% on the Chinese EV products. So all these new tariffs by USA or other major developed nations of the world is to stop China from being the global manufacturer and to stop it from capturing the international markets. The third and the final reason for the Chinese economic turmoil is its governance structure itself. To understand this issue properly, we need to get a basic idea of the governance structure in China. At the top of the hierarchy, we have the President of China, who also happens to be the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. Currently, Xi Jinping, the Communist Party, is the power center, which controls all departments from military to court to the parliament. There are over 4 million grassroots branches or local branches at the bottom, headed by Xi Jinping and the Communist Party. Due to this centralization of power, the local governments are often pressurized by the central power to implement projects in the strategic sectors like electric vehicles, energy, real estate, and semiconductors. And guys, please understand that these projects are not meant to fulfill the economic demand, but rather to fulfill the political aspirations of the government. Adding to the criticality of the situation is the lack of funds with the local governments, which are actually responsible for implementation of these projects in the strategic sectors. Most of the funds and revenue from taxes is taken by the Central Communist Party. Hence, the local governments do not have adequate funds to implement the projects. Hence, the local government resort to raising loans, some of which are off the book also. Guys, understand. The local governments are keen on implementing the projects to be in the good books of the president. Over the years, these unwanted projects have made the local government debt-ridden. According to recent estimates of one of the major journals, the total local government debt could be as high as $11 trillion, with around 800 billion at serious risk of default. To conclude, I can say that the current turmoil in the Chinese economy is a classic example of an unbalanced approach of demand and supply. The supply has exceeded the demand to an extent which has caused prices to fall, inventories which are unattended, unfinished and unsold real estate, and debt-ridden businesses which are finally defaulting. I would say it is a classic case where the government interferes too much into the working of the businesses and framing of the economic policies. The economic advisors and the economic experts and policy experts do not have much say in framing the course of correction or the course of action for the country. Rather than the stimulus which the Chinese government is infusing to reinvigorate the economy, I believe that a major course of correction is needed in the way China is conducting its businesses, governance, and policies. Thank you. If you have any comments and any suggestions or any other points that you may want to add, please comment, and also subscribe and like, because it will influence me to go deeper into researching for topics and present it to you. You can find the different sources, the different articles, videos I have referred to make this video in the description box.